Week 12 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few defense DST units I looked at off the wire this week. The first one, the Cleveland Browns. They're out there in 52% of fantasy leagues as this Cleveland Brown DST. And they're coming off a good fantasy game, even though they lost in Week 11 versus Baltimore. But more than anything, they're a good streaming option this week at the Raiders that give up the third most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. So the last few weeks for Cleveland, Week 8 at New England, 30 points allowed, 6 sacks and interception of fumble recovery. Week 9 at the Jets, 27 points allowed, 3 sacks and INT. In Week 11 versus Baltimore, 23 points allowed, 5 sacks, 2 interceptions with a pick 6 in that ball game. So Week 11 versus Baltimore, 23 points allowed, 5 sacks, 2 interceptions, one of them being a pick 6. So Week 12, good matchup at Vegas. Vegas didn't play yet, where they versus the Dallas Cowboys tonight on Monday Night Football. But like I said, Cleveland, for the most part this season, they've been a solid defense in terms of fantasy football. And when you got the best pass rusher in the game in Myles Garrett, it's going to make everything easier. So with all those factors and a good matchup coming up, they're definitely an ad this week. The next DST is the Chicago Bears. So this Bear DST, they go out there, they get to the quarterback, they create turnovers. And it was a little bit different in Week 11, where they actually held Minnesota down to 17 points. Usually more weeks than not, they give up a lot of points, but get it back with turnovers and even find in the end zone at times. Week 9 at Cincinnati, 42 points allowed, 3 sacks, 2 INTs, a fumble recovery. Week 10 versus Giants, 20 points allowed, 4 sacks, a fumble recovery. And Week 11 in Minnesota, only 17 points allowed, 2 INTs, where it was surprising they didn't get a sack. So Week 12, a decent matchup versus Pittsburgh. We'll see if Aaron Rodgers plays in this game. But as of now, with that wrist injury with Rodgers, I don't know if he's going to be playing in this one for this Pittsburgh Steelers team. And even if he does, I still think it's an okay matchup where Rodgers, if you get a hand on him, obviously he's going to go down at 41 years old, and also as well wouldn't be 100% if he's out there, even though it's his non-throwing arm. Take a hit or two, they can knock him out of the game. So with all those factors, and this Bears team 7-3 on the season, and the defense, for the most part, has been playing good. They're out there in 63% of fantasy leagues. The next DST, Jacksonville Jaguars. So they're 1 week streaming option, even though they're coming off a monster game versus one of the better offenses in the league in the Los Angeles Chargers. Week 9 in Las Vegas, 29 points allowed, 2 sacks and INT. Week 10 at Houston, 30 points allowed, 2 sacks and INT. Fumble recovery, a return touchdown by Parker Washington. In Week 11 versus the Chargers, to hold that offense down to 6 points is very impressive. 3 sacks and INT. So Week 12 at Arizona, they give up the 4th most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. But the only thing is, Arizona still gets their yards. I know last week it was a lot of garbage time. Arizona got blown out in that game versus San Francisco, but Jacoby Brissett playing good football. But Jacksonville, they're going to create turnovers. They'll get to the quarterback. They'll give up their points. But like I said, the last couple weeks, they're going out there and they're putting up the fantasy points, like I said. And this week with a good matchup at Arizona as a streaming option, they're out there in 80% of fantasy leagues. Next DSTs, the San Francisco 49ers, another streaming option this week is the San Francisco DST. They're coming off a mediocre game. Like I said, though, a lot of garbage time it was for Arizona. But this week, a matchup versus Carolina gives up the 13th most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. I know, obviously, Carolina came off a big ball game, but that was Atlanta. At least this defense, even with Bosa and Warner out for the season, not going to give up all those points, like I said, besides that 1 week in Week 10 versus Los Angeles, where that's a juggernaut of an offense giving up 42 points. So the last few weeks for the Niners DST, Week 8 at Houston, 26 points allowed on INT. Week 9 at the Giants, 24 points allowed, 2 sacks. Week 10 versus the Rams, 42 points allowed, a sack. In Week 11 at Arizona, 22 points allowed, 2 INTs, a fumble recovery. So like I said, I could see a similar type of game like we saw in Week 11 from this Niners defense versus the Panthers, and that's with San Francisco at home this week, and they're available right now in 82% of fantasy leagues. And the final DST is the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders, they didn't play yet this week. They're versus the Dallas Cowboys here tonight on Monday Night Football. But this Vegas Raider DST out there in 96% of fantasy leagues, and now I'm going off of a streaming option matchup as well versus the Browns. Obviously, Shedeur Sanders most likely going to be in there for his first career start in the NFL, and the Browns give up the 6th most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. So the last couple weeks before, obviously, tonight's game for this DST, Week 9 versus Jacksonville, 30 points allowed, a sack and INT. In Week 10, they played a great game at Denver, but obviously their offense couldn't come through and help them pull off the upset victory. 10 points allowed, 2 sacks, 2 INTs on that Thursday night football game. So like I said, this Raider team, not a good defense at all, but Max Crosby, one of the best pass rushers in the league, and I'm just going off a matchup as a streaming option. So that's a few defense DSTs I would add for week 12 of the fantasy football season.